family. 9:24 on the clock. Beautiful clear night tonight. Back at it with another live stream. Gosh, it's been fun to do these sequentially, catching the moon every night. I think we're going to get the best viewing we've gotten in a while. Look at these sharp craters and features. Lots to zoom in on. I see Ellie in the chat. It's been a while, girl. Awesome to see you. I see Genghis is first, Plain Truth, of course Ellie, Patrick, Miguel, Shockwave, what's going on? I'm feeling pretty good tonight, I gotta say. I've been studying all day, watched a bunch of videos, liked a bunch of videos, and then thought about the thumbnail for tonight. I don't know, it's interesting because I've really stayed away from clickbaity thumbnails and clickbaity titles, but tonight I think is maybe my most clickbaity title ever. But I just want to think about it a little bit, especially because we can see a lot of detail on the moon tonight, and this is within the stellar metamorphosis idea that potentially all planets and moons come from stars originally, and that maybe our moon was once also a habitated Earth, or a habitable planet. Maybe it wasn't exactly like Earth, but maybe it was a planet with life on it, and now it's desiccated. It's like it lost its atmosphere, it's lost all its volcanism. It's essentially a shell of its former self. So it's an interesting idea regardless. Jedi Knight 888, hello there. Easy E, what's going on? Welcome. Hope everybody's having an awesome family. Hope everybody's having an awesome weekend. Sunday with their family. Let's see, Shockwave is saying, was listening last night about the guy's theory that the Earth is older than the Sun. Yeah, I don't think so. If anything, they're the same age, created in the same electric event. Either a Herbig Harrow. But Shockwave, I was thinking about this in terms of that idea, but it fits pretty well. It just means that that our system could have been a series of stars, right? So every planet in our solar system is actually a star that is forming either at a different rate or at a different period in its life cycle. It doesn't mean that it couldn't, our polar configuration might not have been a tightly wound spiral at the beginning, like a filament, a chain of pearls in our solar system. But it's more so that the idea, the origin of planets, is really misunderstood at this point. At least the mainstream idea is not. There's no real consensus on how planets are formed, be it accretion disk model or along the arms of spiral galaxies, by clumping. This is one of those things that we could talk about a lot, but if you look into it, you'll see that this idea that actually stars cook up to a point and then ultimately become planets because the cooking took place inside a star, and then you see the dimensions and you see the age processes. It makes, honestly, so much more sense this way. But I think you have to kind of give it a fair shake, I feel. I see Cyber Sully, what's going on? I've heard the theory that the planets were birthed from the sun. Interesting to contemplate. Like, when I first heard it, it was one of those, it was like that same aha moment that Wal Thornhill talks about, that same feeling I had with Electric Universe when I saw those first videos where it's like, oh, all these symbols come from plasma discharge in the sky. All the mythology is actually astronomy. Well, that's a huge revelation. Or a huge thing to hear, and kind of breaks your whole brain. So hearing this idea that planets ultimately evolve, stars ultimately evolve into planets, not every star, but that this is one way that planets can form, is like actually pretty brilliant, I think, and it opens up all these different pathways. Ultimately, even within stellar metamorphosis, everybody agrees on how stars essentially come to being. Let's see. What's up, Mimsical Renegade? Welcome. It's fine for us to disagree, of course, as always. I see Atavium, Electric Universe Hypothesis, awakened me. It really gave me that final frontier knowledge. It was like of course, a lot of people, I think, have gone through the certain phases. Like early 2000s, we were interested in conspiracies, and then it kind of went further than conspiracies, and then everyone sort of got into suspicious observers. And around 2012, people were like splitting off into this idea that the universe might be electric and connected versus isolated universe in a gravity-driven model. And then you also have these kind of other fractures of the shape of Earth, the level of conspiracy. These are types of things that are like more, I guess, juicier in terms of the narrative. But really, when you think about plasma and the idea that that's already, the science of it is already pretty mainstream, but the pop mainstream story of our cosmos is so convoluted at this point that people can't identify with it. And so it's one of those really things that happen naturally, I think, where people ultimately stumbled across Thunderbolts Project or one of the Electric Universe channels and thought, wait, it makes way more sense that things are connected and things are fractal. And that's why I think we're here, where there's so many more channels talking about Electric Universe and far fewer channels really trying to stick with the old dogma, even though you have big gatekeeper channels that do that. What do I think about Artemis? I'm keeping an open mind about all the excuse me, all the public missions. So I've been talking a lot the last few nights, so forgive my voice, it's going to be kind of scratchy, but I want to keep an open mind about Artemis and make sure that, like, I'm not just having, you know, prejudice about agency astronomy and stuff like that. So we'll see. I mean, it's been scrubbed a couple of times. I'm paying attention to it. I think there's, like, I'd love to see what happens with it. I hope we get real, like, amazing data from it. And data, so something I heard, which, I mean, if we're talking about just little nitpicks, but somebody got a question on the live stream. They're like, will we get high-resolution photos of the moon? And I think one of the answers from the host was like, yes, we'll have cameras, but like only selfie cameras. You know, this mission is not really about taking photos. And I was like, this is just like one of those ridiculous things that, why isn't the mission also about taking photos? It's just so ridiculous to say, oh, well, we're doing all this, but we're really not putting like a lot of cameras on board, which is pretty ridiculous, even if they are. But I still want to keep an open mind and hope Artemis succeeds. First time I heard about Electric Universe, I guess, was Suspicious Observers back in 2012. But he really wasn't talking about it the same way Thunderbolts was till, I think, around 2014 or 2013. I found Thunderbolts videos, and Eric Lerner, Eric Dollard, Ken Wheeler are all around the same time. But it took me a few years to change the thoughts, you know, the idea that mainstream science was so wrong about the way they presented things. But now it seems so obvious that they're either completely hiding it or completely don't know where they're going with mainstream science at this point. What's going on, Aram Vorax? Great to see you. Do I think they're stalling? I really don't know. It's hard to tell with all that stuff. I mean, I gotta say I'm actually surprised that we're this close to launching. I thought it would take a lot longer, so my kind of prejudices have been quelled to a degree. I'm one of those people that, like, I think there are definite conspiracies, but I also think that a lot of the things that we have in this world are filled with truth. But you can have something that's fully truthful and then tell a lie that's a narrative that's a lie about that truth and still get a bunch of people on board. So it happens all the time in politics. Let's see. First tune request. No, we can survive. I can do that. Let's do it. And I'd like to do some zoomed in shots. We have a lot of the moon tonight, but I'm gonna make sure we fully utilize our clear skies tonight. Let me know whatever questions you have or thoughts you have. Definitely give the stellar metamorphosis theory a spin. There's no reason why not. The guy's really cool, Jeffrey Walensky. He speaks really cogently and sincere and earnestly, I guess, and that theory is holistic, and if nothing else, it gives you some new ideas to ponder. I'll talk more about that. Case in point, the moon being an old Earth is like a very cool idea that just emerges from this idea, this hypothesis. And no other theory really questions the age of the moon. Really, nobody's really questioning the age of the moon, seriously. It's so strange how you pay for these pro services, but they're not good. Alright. Track coming in. Dark Rum's coming up next. I want to comment on the last couple of things, but I'll play another song first. Zoomed in right here to the Apennine mountain range, and this is the huge gateway kind of right between Sea of Serenity to the right, bottom right, and Mare Imbrium to the top left. Gosh, almost Mare Mumbrium. You can see Archimedes, which is the largest crater to the left with the 3 striations coming out of it. And you've got, I think it's Autolycus and Cassini are the other 2 big craters there. So let's do some dark rums here, and I want to comment on this idea that we can, a belief is an Genghis Khan writes, or comments, a quote says, "A belief is an attitude that something is the case or that some proposition about the universe is true." Continues, "I feel our belief about the universe is still changing, especially with the new Webb images." So the whole thing with the James Webb Telescope, and just that I'd like to comment, which is, it's just showing that the answers are already there. It's just giving you much finer pictures of what we already know to be there. So I don't think, it's not like you can't make new discoveries. It's just that when you zoom in as far as you can, the universe tends to run away from you, almost like a dream. And this is where Alan Watts describing this idea that if you had the most powerful microscope, the universe would still look smaller and smaller and smaller. And the bigger the telescope, the more things would just be filled in with extra things. You'd never really see the end of things, because there is no end of things to see. Because as soon as you see something, that is now the end. You know what I mean? So it's almost like self-realization is actually the answer here. That's why like no scientific discovery is ever going to go further than the fact that you made your own body, which is a superhuman or godlike feat. You put your eyeballs in the right place, you sectioned your body, you grow your hair right now. You ultimately decay your own body and rot your own body too. And therefore planets do, proteins do, electrical currents that connect everything apply this logic and methodology to creating life as we know it. So I think that's the big thing with Webb, even though the Webb telescope photos are absolutely amazing and they're the most refined images of space we have, and I think they're 100% real. Obviously they're all Photoshopped because you have to stack that data. However, they are real, but it just shows that the filaments are all there. The Har Big Harrow, Her Big Harrow objects, the long chains of pearls of stars and along a Birkeland filament. You're seeing the symmetry and the idea of these nebular clusters and galaxies. The answer there is that those are the shapes that permeate reality fractally. That's the big takeaway, I think. I don't think you're going to, like, finding an exoplanet makes... Of course we're going to find tons of exoplanets. There's almost this thing where it's like the more seductive thing is this, wow, like we got to figure out this other thing. There's always alien bases on the moon, but the moon itself is not impressive enough, if you catch my gist. Clearly the moon is the impressive thing. I can feel like the way. I can feel like waves. I can feel. We'll never know. Yeah, good catch over there. I was going to go there. And the detail's amazing. It's Eratosthenes is the crater that we're talking about here with the trifecta central dome, which is truly remarkable. It's one of the few craters or features on the moon that looks like this. And, you know, if you were inclined back in the day and you saw a blurry shot of this and you had somebody hyping you up, you thought this was a T3RB craft landed in the center of a crater, until you realize how big these craters are, and you realize, like, there would also be no craft landed there, just sitting there. But let's zoom in a tiny bit. Most central peaks are not like that, even though you do have, to have a trifecta of objects or range it like micro mountains in the center is not uncommon. This is the most equilateral version. So zoom in just a tiny bit more. And what's very cool about this is not just that Eratosthenes has the sides too, right? It's not perfectly hexagonal, but you can see the octahedral shape to it. And more so, just the right side is not completely straight, but like curved ever so slightly. And you also have the whole Apennine mountain range, basically, that outlines so many different things. One, it outlines a spinal column, but here I think, really, since our spinal column also outlines a Birkeland current or an electrical filament, this filament is essentially the peak of the mountain range is where the most material has gathered, and then it gradiates downwards. And that's a very simplistic understanding of it compared to what Andrew Hall talks about on Thunderbolts, but this is what I think, you know, material is basically squeezed and pinched together along filaments. These filaments are always kind of these winding paths. So it's a yes, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, wiggly path. And that's how we have these ranges that are formed. Similarly, the structure of the geometry of the craters and the central peaks are another thing where I talked about it so many times, but either impact versus electrical scarification. Another thing to consider now, that maybe a lot of it is volcanism as well, giant volcanoes that occurred on the moon if the moon was an old Earth, which in my mind somehow now is the story, even though nobody has to believe me. I'm just thinking. But it's actually very cool to imagine that. What's going on, Red Room? Yeah, TR3B, right? Not T3RB. Alright, let's keep going with some tunes here, and I'll keep zooming around the moons. Let me know if you have any song requests. Go with Operator right here. quick little sketch. So we're looking at this region. We've seen it many times before, but I'm noticing something. To be fair, I have noticed this before, but it's very, very apparent tonight, and I can share it with y'all. Do you see all these kind of... So bottom left corner, before I start, let me get my paint program pulled up here and just point out these couple of regions. So right here, this thing right here, that's Huygens sword, or Huygens sword. And it's like the sharpest vertical or horizontal sinuous rill that we have on the moon. It's almost like a shelf in the mare. And or it's an electrical scar, and or it's something else, right? Who knows? I think there's it's interesting. This is one of those tricky ones because it's not a wiggle, right? It's not like a Lichtenberg common kind of channel or rill. So this could have been like maybe a pinch, like this area pinched up against this area with maybe it was an electrical arc moving across the surface. But it's less that this region is cool, which we'll zoom in here as well. But let's just mark Huygens sword. But then look at all these other lines right here. Let me actually increase the size of the brush so I can't even see my cursor. Yeah, look at that. That. There. Very interesting combination. So Ptolemaeus, Alphonsus, and Arzachel. Really clear hex. Not a great drawing of a hex, but another one. Looks like a molecule, right? Another hexagon. This is Albategnius. And then Arzachel, a little more eroded, a little more desiccated. But again, chains of mini mares or mini craters looking like molecular structure is just amazing. Whether or not it's impact or electric scarification doesn't really matter, more so the nature of the universe being this inherent fundamental fractal geometry structure. We see the same structure here between Sea of Serenity and Sea of Tranquility. Same thing with a sugar molecule. But let me jump into the chat for a second. I see NGC. Great to see you. Hey, just saying hello to everyone. Did I miss anyone else in the chat? Spherical packing. Exactly, spherical packing. That's why it happens, I believe. Pressure mediation between an expanding sphere and its objects within its vicinity, or in fact just the pressure density that it achieves when it hits a certain type of its boundary layer that is achieved once it hits a certain density. So circles emanate outwards omnidirectionally until they find the next closest thing, and then they will closely pack without actually touching, and that creates what we see as corners in nature. But anyway, I think it's the first time I've actually noted all these vertical striations or horizontal striations. I would say rather parallel striations at various scales, and it's quite cool. I think quite interesting. Let's see. Genghis is saying stress marks / quakes from cooling. I think definitely could be. Okay, kill that. Either way, just a little bit about the region we're looking at. We'll get back to it, but actually really amazing detail tonight. And interestingly, of course, that Huygens sword is pointed, or at least parallel to all of these striations as well, even though it's much straighter. Pretty cool. Pretty hot. Now you're here, let me kiss you. Did you hear that I missed you? Now you're here, let me taste you. that I missed you? Now you're here, let me test you. Did you hear that I missed you? Now you're here. Did you hear that I missed you? Now you're here, let me test you. Let me test you. Underneath the stars, count your numbers. Fly above the moon, feel you new. Into the dark beyond, saw your umbra. Across the nature's arm, so electric blue. Underneath the stars, did you hear that I missed you? Fly above the moon. Now you're here, let me kiss you. Did you hear that I missed you? Now you're here, let me kiss you. Did you hear that I missed you? Underneath the stars. Take time to believe in the world, fill it up with everything you can for. Take time to believe in the world, fill it up with everyone you love. Take time to believe in the world, fill it up with everyone you care for. Take time to believe in the world, Vibes here. I'll get back to set this feeling just quickly. I rotated the camera so you can see the whole let me see, it's like 64.8% of the lunar surface right now. Excellent libration tilt, where the moon tilts little parts of the edges towards us or away from us. So at the very bottom you can see Mare Crisium and these really cool mares that are beyond it, Mare Undarum and Mare, what's the other one? Oh, I don't remember. Undarum and something else. Mare Marginis. So, really excellent regions. Let me clean up this slide real quick and just scribble for a Momo. Just for a Momo. Alright, so since we're looking here at Mare Crisium, I'm just going to do the quick hexagon tour. So right here we got Proclus with its 3 rays jutting out in equal degrees, the Triforce. well, it's not really a triforce, but it could be a triforce. It's more like an XYZ axis. And then we've got Mare Crisium over here. We've got our hexagonal form. Then we've got Tranquility, Serenity, Pentagon into Hexagon. So Serenity into Tranquility. Then we've got Nectaris. Gosh, my hexagons suck tonight. You can see it. Is it a pentagon? I think this is a hexagon too, though. I think it's just the angle that we're viewing it. And then Fecunditatis over here. It's really kind of overlaid. There we go. Then we got Mare Imbrium over here. Mare Imbrium is more, I want to say, octagonal, but you'll notice every time I draw it, there's almost a feature at the rim of every large mare. Posidonius. Here you got Theophilus, Plato. And these features kind of recur because these geometric features on the moon are fractal in nature. Large craters on the rims of mares, small craters on the rims of large craters, and then hexagons into pentagons. And the simple reason that I think they form that is because when you expand two circles like bubbles, you get circle packing, and circle packing essentially creates straight boundaries. Also, this is where Birkeland current would be. It's the shape of an apple or a butterfly. It's the pinched plasma tube or the hypotrochoid. It's the dielectric inertial plane where your eyeballs are formed. It's where the nose is. And then the mouth. That's a terrible mouth. The mouth is actually a lot more geometric. Humans are born along Birkeland filaments just like creatures. That's why we have a template for organization in the universe, but then we have variation through the layering and structuring of the materials that are formed. But see, ultimately all the materials are really just light. According to Ken Wheeler, hard light makes up hydrogen. So high intensity light really becomes what we perceive as hard versus soft, or permeable versus, permissivity versus permittivity. What you can go through or what you can't go through, in very simple terms, of course. So we got the nested craters, nested hexagons, chains of craters. Whether or not, I saw a lot of great videos from See the Pattern from Gareth doing a lot of the work that I kind of wanted to do, but he's done it pretty much. He dug up all the different concepts around electric scarification versus impact, and I'm not sure if if he kind of drew an ultimate conclusion, but at least he's presented the evidence in a very clear way. The stuff from Brian J. Ford and Ralph Jurgens and Thunderbolts and Velikovsky, the fact that planets could be scarred by electric arcing. Of course, you have Jacob Gable, you have Electric Universe Eyes, you have Billy Yelverton, and tons of experimentation of electric arcing in a laboratory creating features that we see on the moon, including the sinuous rills, hexagonal craters, bubbling, and surface features. But let's take it like one quick step further here. Exactly, boobs, Red Rome says. I mean, that's why all the features of the human body are symmetrical, because the two spheres that are formed along the central axis are essentially not only, they're outlining the center of the toroidal ring of energy. Yo, 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 Charlie Silverman, what's going on? Welcome. And let me know if I missed anybody in the chat. Awesome to see all the great comments, thank you. I see Astralis, Om Padme, Om, is that, what is it? Om Padme something. Is it even Padme? Om Mani Padme Om. That's what it is. I'm trying to keep my brain fresh. This tilt is really cool, but that's actually, just so you know, I've done it with the camera. I done did it with the camera. So yeah, let's get back to the tunes here. Just want to hop in and talk a little bit tonight. Sleepless Riders coming in. haven't played that one in a while. That was Keep You Waiting. I'm going to look for another track here and just chat and see if I see more Jello saying what's up to Dagger Spells as well. Nice to see you. I hope you're all having an amazing weekend. And I think everybody has the day off tomorrow, right? I don't really follow national holidays necessarily anymore, but I guess it was some sort of thing. Like literally my brain is so filled with, and when I say my brain, I mean my field membrane is so filled with data right now, like points of instantiated consciousness that are their own little oscillations of information with their own fields. And one of them is Rupert Sheldrake, and one of them is Eileen McCusick, and another one is now Jeffrey Walensky, another one is Thunderbolts Project, all these little oscillating sources feeding me all the data, and then I get here and I share it with y'all. And that's how I go to sleep. I mean, otherwise I can't really sleep. I don't think I have that song loaded up here, Pat. It's on Bandcamp. I don't know if I really want to play that. That's a bit of an old one. Bit of a weird memory song. I definitely don't have it pulled up here. Maybe one day. Maybe one day I'll resurrect it. Different request, please. Let's go with something different. What about some Bring Me Back? Because we got NGC in the chat. Even having one super fan about like the one of your favorite songs is the best. So I know a lot of you are fans at every level, at every different size planet, but this one's out to NGC tonight. This is version 8, by the way. Roll it back.
Just bring me back out of the cold. Ooh, bring me back. Just bring me back. I need you more. This cosmic revelation. To play, we the creatures grinding against the grain. Built a world with nothing to fear but yourself. Apparitions that we bleed through. Every fear, your open white soul modulation. You just come feel this ride so high, your love I'm craving. Tell you, ooh, just bring me back. Oh, bring me back out of the cold.
I love it. I'm having a vintage gear flex off with Charlie. No, I'm just kidding. I think I wasn't trying to flex, but it was just funny that, like, reminiscing over old recording hardware. It was around the same year. I think it was probably '96 when in my teenage high school band. It wasn't an 8-track? It was, right? Not a 4-track. Let me just double check this. Tascam. Reel to reel, 8-track. That's the one. Damn, it's only $1,500. But gosh, this was just amazing, and the sound on it was amazing too. It wasn't like, it was really like, I remember it being very high, very trebly, like not a lot of bass in it, but man, it was warm. The solos sounded good. But then, yeah, so Charlie's saying had an Akai S3000 back in '97, cracked copy of Cubase for Atari. Still got my Kawai K4. She hasn't powered up for over 10 years or so, though. Yeah, I don't think I kept any of the old gear. I think the oldest piece of gear I have is this Boss foot pedal from like '98, I think. First year that I really kind of spent some money on gear. But then, yeah, I was talking about like making music production using Logic, eMagic Logic on a PC in like the year 2000, probably 99, 2000, and then Apple bought Logic, and you had to really, that was it. Like you couldn't get the upgrade anymore. You couldn't really use Logic with all the new stuff, and so it really converted a bunch of people over to Apple. But I gotta say, Logic is one of the coolest programs and cheap for what you can do with it. I know. I have seen Ableton recently, and gosh, that looks amazing, but I don't know if I have any more space in my membrane field to acquire new like skills. I actually downloaded Ableton. I was like, oh man, I could do a bunch with this, but I tend to come back to grooves ultimately when I write songs. Like I do complex stuff, and then I'll just try and find like a simple bass line or a simple guitar hook that like actually draws you in, and I think it's more ultimately, after all these years of playing, the best part of the most important thing in writing is surprise. It's kind of like a good mix of familiarity and surprise. It's like getting people into something they understand, they get, and then as soon as they start to get bored with it, you change it a little bit, and then you keep doing that on a micro and macro scale. And then if you have some soul, it makes it a lot easier. Like, and soul just comes from like a ton of hardship. typically a lot of trauma. The more trauma, sometimes the more soul. I don't know, maybe that's just my take on it, but that's a little bit I don't want to say what's missing from contemporary music besides a bunch of cocaine. Everything's too sober nowadays, but probably not. Everything's too psychedelic. Maybe they're not like, there's no angst left. It's like faux angst. But I think what's lacking is is that the generation that comes now is like has all access to information and hardware and technology, and it's this kind of age of laziness in a way. Even though people are working harder than ever, it's this weird dichotomy of both those things, where I feel like the music nowadays just feels like there's not maybe enough pain, or maybe it's just gone so far past pain that it seems plastic. I don't know. Just can't listen to anything contemporary. Let's see. Yeah, that's kind of the same thing. I think what Charlie's saying, I work on my own now, which is difficult sometimes with nobody to bounce anything off of. I kind of am the same. I mean, I'm definitely the same way. Like the last band I was in was over 10 years ago now, and I think about starting a band or joining a band to perform all these songs, but then I think I'm in love with the process of writing, and I could probably just continue to only write and then share it here and with friends, and just, I think the most I get out of the music is that I can listen to my own stuff and really enjoy it. So I'm writing stuff that I, as a very jaded and cynical listener with an ear for certain things, I want to write music that I can just throw on my phone and just say, oh, that's fucking cool that I wrote that. I know it's probably very narcissistic of me, but I think if you look up and listen to other songwriters, per se, as people are craftspeople that decide to become songwriters, like not people who write songs, but actual songwriters who can sit down and just craft songs. They may happen to be producers or musicians or singers, and they may happen to be artists of themselves, but I think there's a thing to writing a song. It's a completely different thing than most people understand, but when you can do it, it becomes an addiction. And you can tell because tons of the famous songs were written by the same people. Because like Jeff Lynne wrote all these songs, and Motown kind of had a group of writers. The writers are, Carole King, and it goes down the line. Right now I'm not thinking of that many, but quite a few, ultimately. Even, especially now, but now it's because people are just too rich. They got to pump out so much stuff that things have just, the bar has been lowered so much that it's kind of a combination of a visual spectacle and passable music, and that's why old music is just better to an older. I think younger generations are also finding that 80s music is great. So it's not really just old people. But yeah, I was going to say, Charlie, I feel like I'm lucky because I get to do astronomy, which I love, but also write songs about astronomy, and then also share the music with a small audience that really gives a crap about it, and that gives me breaks for having like messy mixes or whatever, and just enjoys the process. And so that to me is just like this incredible luxury as a solo artist, to like just share that with a small group of people and not need the big kind of band thing and the touring thing. It's just so much work for. I've played live shows and they're actually amazing, but they're exhausting ultimately. And if you've done one, or like if you've done 10, I think you're good. 10 good shows. I think I've had at least 20 good shows before. So let's see. Sorry, I'm going off on a music rant here, but that's what I was doing. Inverted moon, looking amazing. I love seeing the Maria, the different seas or the oceans. Again, like the thumbnail of this video, I don't like being clickbaity and saying, oh my god, the moon's an old Earth, but just thinking about stellar metamorphosis theory and the fact that the moon could have been an old Earth is just something new. And when do you get to think about something actually new? And I say new, I mean other people have probably thought about it, but it's a very rare fringe group of people that have actually mentioned this idea, maybe. And to be one of those people, I think, is actually fresh. It's like writing a great new song that people haven't heard. Thinking about this idea that, okay, maybe the moon was a habitated Earth. This is why we see these things that look like oceans and continental plates. And also, basically, we're seeing the bottom of oceans and land masses that have been pulverized and desiccated over however many, in this stellar metamorphosis model, maybe 100 billion years, 500 billion years. In other models, who knows, maybe electric universe. Maybe if time is gradiated and not constant, then we don't know exactly how fast things happen, or maybe things slow down. Or I personally think that things gradiate, and therefore then if you look backwards in time, it doesn't make sense to think about time as we experience it right now, because experiencing time must have been different 1,000,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago. Even slightly would change a lot of things. Hoo-wee. It is hot, hot, hot. Yeah, so fresh idea, new idea is moon was an old Earth, and it's one of the best, again, reasons why you see all these landmass structures, because this is something that would make sense if you looked at a planet that has lost its atmosphere, it's lost its volcanism, it's lost its inner core. Basically, this is the inner core of the planet. So Earth still has a molten core, which fits with the standard model. So again, like a lot of the stuff on this channel, and you probably heard me walk a fine line between standard model and quantum mechanics and electric universe and other things, because I don't think I don't think it's wrong to kind of cherry pick good ideas and put them together. That's, I think, efficiency modeling. So if we pick up a little bit from stellar metamorphosis and we're trying to do some of these ideas like the moon rang like a bell, people always refer to that either conspiratorially to infer that the moon is a man-made structure or an artificial structure or aliens. NASA proposes it as a public piece of evidence that astronauts landed, I think a spacecraft landed. I'm kind of not exactly, let me just check. Let me not talk out of my ass here. Rang like a bell. Rang like a bell. Which Apollo was it? All right. Between 1969 and 77, seismometers installed on the moon by the Apollo missions recorded moonquakes. The moon was described as ringing like a bell during some of those quakes, specifically the shallow ones. So that is public mainstream understanding, right? So there's no real explanation or consensus by mainstream science that says this is exactly why that happened. Carolina, what's going on? Eurydice, I got you, no problem. I'll pull that up next. I got a comment. Let me see some comments here. Let me see some comments. Shockwave. All moons, I guess, were caught in the creation process of the planets they orbit, and or created after by the sun they both orbit, or could have come from the body of. Yeah, well, I mean, I think let's try and simplify that to just because. I don't know, for debate's sake. So mainstream says that accretion disks, so small debris ultimately clumps together to form a planet like Earth or a moon. And Electric Universe says that nebular hypothesis is somewhat right, but not completely right, because potentially, and Wal Thornhill has said this, that maybe the Earth or the moon, I forget, was ejected from Jupiter, and that Jupiter is potentially hollow. So there are certain things now that I'm noticing when you actually consider what Jeffrey Walensky is saying in terms of stellar metamorphosis, because what he's just saying is look at it differently. And if you just flip the whole thing on its head, you start to infer all these other ideas. So the fact that like the moon rang like a bell in the stellar metamorphosis concept or theory makes a lot of sense, because at this point, the moon is, let's say, a couple of 100 billion years old. It's completely desiccated, and it's essentially, we're looking at the ocean floor of a previous Earth-like planet, if you will. That, to me, I don't think anyone's even said anything remotely logical to that extent of logic until I heard this idea. I mean, Jeffrey doesn't say this directly. I'm deducing it from what he's implying, what he's set up. But that, to me, is a very interesting idea. It's like one of these new concepts that I think is worth talking about. You know, I don't think it's worth actually. I don't think there's any benefit in saying no. This is settled science, and in the Electric Universe model, this is the way it is, and therefore that's it. Because it's only 3 different methods, right? Right now, mainstream says accretion disk clumping together. Electric Universe says potentially birthing from larger planets or stars, and or accretion disk clumping. And stellar metamorphosis says no, the moons and Earths were actually the centers of stars, which is very much like a fruit. It's the way fruit grows. It's the way humans grow. It's a lot more holistic and logical, I think. I mean, tell me what you think in the chat. I see a lot of stuff, Shockwave, like, I'm not sure what you're implying, but the Earth geode has a plasma core that is in fact acting as a plasmoid. But don't, you know, just in the idea of having everything be a fractal recursion of things, everything at its core is acting like a plasmoid. Everything is basically a toroidal plasma knot, or Birkeland filament, or Markland convection crossing wires, creating a node, and that node at every scale should be doing the same pretty much thing, at just in different orders of magnitude, right? I mean, it wouldn't make sense that everything acts, one thing acts one way, another thing acts another way. You're 20 minutes behind the live stream. Well, great to see you, Carolina. Let's play some Eurydice over here. And let me know if I missed you in the chat. Shockwave, there's so much to talk about. We'll probably have to do another live show together so we can disagree live and direct. Now, but come on, I think you need to give this theory a little bit more than a cursory glance, right? Look, people could mock me or say that I don't know what I'm talking about or say this theory is ridiculous, character assassinate, but if you really consider it, like, there's this whole thing about conspiracy and pointing fingers and the whole YouTube scene about, like, this guy debunks that guy, but no, I'm going to re-debunk you, and I'm going to find aliens, but you're wrong, and I'll show you at the end of time. When we all get raptured, I'm going to be there, point my finger and say, haha, I was right. X-class solar flare wiped us all out. I think it's, like, so ridiculous to imagine people behaving that way. I think it's, like, the worst of intentions for the planet. I mean, the worst, I guess, it's like judging a child for having curiosity and saying, look, don't be a child. Why are you acting like a child? Humanity is curious, right? People are curious about lots of different ideas. This idea that, like, we shouldn't entertain ideas because other people want to police our ideas is so, like, absurd to me. Yeah. Whimsical, are you leaving? No, don't leave. Oh, right. Don't go chasing waterfalls of electrical current. Yeah, so if you watched Donald Scott's recent video on Thunderbolts Project with the dam metaphor where he talks about the slow and fast solar wind, the most obvious thing that he was just wasted opportunity of saying that we call it air currents right now, right? Like currents. He's like, why don't we call it currents instead of wind? I mean, we do. And wind, essentially, if you pronounce it slightly differently, is wind, which is spin or spiral. The words are themselves recursive fractals, too. I imagine that, like, all the language, all the letters as well. And there's this other thing I've been pondering recently about right to left and left to right writing and reading, having to do with the magnetic field or the electromagnetic field. And who was doing it? I think it was actually Dr. Unziker, Alexander Unziker on Real Physics. He was talking about doing right to left and left to right quaternion geometry, talking about, like, how that made a slight difference in the calculations. And I started to think that's very interesting how we have so many languages that write right to left, and that's fine. You know, the brain works perfectly. Their membrane field works perfectly with that. And other people, like, I don't want to say we can't comprehend. I learned a tiny bit of Japanese, so I feel like my brain sort of comprehends. Well, that's not true. I also know Arabic, so my brain does comprehend both. I would say I'm a lingodextrous. That's not right. Linguidextrous. Ambilingual. Not sure which one comes first. My vocabulary is somewhat lacking tonight. But anyway, the point here is that it's fascinating to consider new concepts. And what's the point of mocking new concepts when they're exciting? Like, you don't mock people for, like, looking for a new movie or a new novel. Even the word novel is novel, right? Like, people want a book with new ideas, but just enough familiarity that they can get through it, right? Like, that's what's so fascinating about the sheep, or the familiarity, or the flesh of the apple versus the seed. I was seeing a diagram about how, like, the Earth's magnetic fields really look like the Earth is the pit of an apple, and it's our layered magnetic fields that extend out into space look exactly like the shape of an apple, like just being affected by the solar wind. Yeah, well, I was actually, I know it's bilingual, it's actually trilingual, but I was actually thinking about reading right to left and left to right. So that would be... I guess ambigram is the word that actually represents going left to right and right to left. So I guess... anyway, if you think about it, yeah, lingual is lingual. Good times. It's Saturday, right? Or it's Sunday. No, it's rather Sunday night, but it feels like a Saturday. Saturday in my field. Eurydice. After a single childhood encounter, I think when I was like 8 years old, I met Eurydice. Actually, it was Eurydice, and we played one afternoon in a garden somewhere on this earth, and then never saw her again. Never heard about her again, but those moments as a child, I guess, that stand out. This was one of them. So I wrote this song like 25 years later about Eurydice, and you know, that's how things go. Ships passing. That track goes deep. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's no way to not sound egocentric about your own tunes, and ego being you know, the particle inside the field, the ego central to all the shells. But anyway, I appreciate y'all vibing out with me to Prism, Dagger, and Golden. Let me pull up some H Alpha here, but also just quickly talk about what we're looking at. So. And say what's up to Waleed, say goodnight to Jello, I think, right? And let me know if I missed anyone. Waleed Z says, if only there was an option to disable atmospheric distortion. So what's interesting is, like, for years, they've had this thing called adaptive optics, which basically does this with a laser setup where it basically creates a fake star, and they create an algorithmic structure of correcting essentially the image every single time it's taken. So you'll see a steady stream of images which turn into basically real-time footage, but every frame is corrected with laser interferometry, where they're gauging where what the atmospheric turbulence or atmospheric distortion does, and then restructuring each frame to be more in line with not looking like it's wiggling or waving, and therefore they basically correct, so to speak, for atmospheric turbulence or atmospheric distortion. Then, so what is it? The system costs like $250,000 is last time I checked. But I will say that I've seen recently some amateur astronomers use like a $50,000 homebrew adaptive optics kit up in New Hampshire, and this guy Edward Ting, I think. I gotta link you guys this channel. It's a great telescope reviewer. I think his name is Ed Ting, T-I-N-G. And he goes up to a place where they have an actual homebrew backyard adaptive optics unit, and so the images are astounding, and they really. So it looks like this, but a little bit sharper, right? But I think more so like when you're looking at like something like Jupiter or Saturn or star formations and galaxies and nebulas, that kind of correction is just much, much better. I think the moon ultimately kind of, I think with enough stacking, you pretty much get the resolution you get with the moon. Yeah, Discog, what's going on? But yeah, adaptive optics is kind of like the thing. But who knows, maybe in 10, 15 years we'll have computers that can solve for that, and then it'll be something like a 5 to 10K add-on. You know, maybe. Would be cool, but ultimately, for me, I think it's like a real-time thing. Like, if I were to have an ideal setup, it would probably be like a 14-inch scope which is about $7,000, $8,000. You need a $5,000 mount. It's like a CG14, one of the Celestron ones. I don't think you'd really ever need more than an Edge 14, something like that. Like a 17-inch scope would be amazing, but it kind of, you get to this diminishing results situation where the scopes are too unwieldy. And then, you know, if you had infinite money, well, not infinite money, if you could just drop $100K on something, you could probably build a dome and get like a $50,000 scope, and then you're talking about like a 3-foot telescope, which I just can't even imagine having something like that to look at the moon or Saturn or Jupiter with. Really mostly those. Of course, looking at nebula would be amazing too, but just looking directly at the moon in real time is, I think, one of the craziest things in my lifetime. As a kid who liked astronomy, and it's like, well, we have to just wait for agencies to take pictures for us, and you know, once in a while some amateur astronomer, some rich dude is like, okay, I'll take a picture, check it out, so look at my book, you know. And now it's like, of course, now everything is really saturated. Like, everybody's grandma can take like an amazing picture of the moon, and YouTube videos have millions and millions of views. But 15 years ago, like, there were like no pictures of the moon, nothing like this at least. Okay. Alright, so it's pulling up a song here. And yeah, we're looking at Plato Crater. I went completely tangential. Where is H alpha? There we go. Alright, before I play the song, so quickly looking at Plato Crater on the rim of Mare Imbrium. Let me just pull this. Actually, no, I'm going to zoom out one layer because it's easier. Alright, so some really interesting... God damn it. Of course, I don't even place the controller on the table. I literally drop it right off the edge of the table. Okay, so where's my sketch tool? Scribbly, scribbly. Okay, so we got Plato Crater over here. And Plato is actually one of the most circular craters, I have to admit. So when people look at it, they'd be forgiven to say this is circular because there are so many little edges to it that is pretty smoothed out. But you still see same sort of angular stuff happening right here. More of a straight side, corner, right? It's just an elongated, almost egg-like, maybe a septagon, a deceptagon, right? Maybe it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 7 sides. 2, 4, 6, 7. Yep, 7 sides. And then what's cool is that you can see this pentagon, hexagon, same as like almost an echo of Sea of Serenity and Sea of Tranquility. Look at that. It's crazy. And of course, look at it. It lines up perfectly with this region, which is, this is like, this is Mare Frigoris, the Sea of Frigidity or Sea of Coldness. And then you have this amazing mountain range that is that kind of leads downwards towards the Apennine range, the Apennine mountain range, but this is actually the Alps, the Montes Alpes. So Monte Alpi, all these Alpes over here. But let me unscribble for a moment. So first of all, you got the chain of craters, or echo of a chain, but still really molecular chain, human field. It's pretty much everything. It's actually letters too. This is how letters are crafted, and I imagine when you say words that the actual oscillations in the field actually look like this geometry too, at different scales, of course, not at every level. So there's that, but let's talk about Valles Alpes and Montes Alpes. So let me pull this up a little bit more. This is one of those features that is talked about on Thunderbolts Project. And of course, as soon as you get to the moon, or as soon as you put the telescope and zoom in, set up a scope and zoom in, you get to see this 300, I want to say kilometer long, probably 300-mile long. Either way, this kind of laser cut through the mountain range, right? Of course, the mountain range was formed prior to this channel, a sinuous rill and a channel. So usually sinuous rills have this kind of roof, more like an elevated welt or a scar left on a body. But if you zoom in, I mean, right now we're getting the optical illusion that it's raised, but in fact it's actually cut right through this mountain range, almost like a dagger. Interestingly, it almost follows the Huygens sword model, where you have this small tetrahedron and then an instantiation point and then a reverse tetrahedron and then a long point. Same thing we saw earlier with Huygens sword. What else do you see? There's like a rabbit head right there. Look at this rabbit. Or is it a duck? No, it's a rabbit. Duck season. Rabbit season, duck season. Yeah, that's what we're looking at. Let's get to the tunes. I'll get back to some more regions. We'll move downwards towards the Apennine range, check out Cassini, and really Archimedes is our next stop. Outline of a comet. Alright, hopping in here real quick to say hi to Mary and Mr. Rojogo Bin. What's going on? Recommended Hiromi Uhara. I haven't heard that artist before, but I will check it out. Listed it. See Flat Earth Dude, what's going on? Welcome. And let me know if I missed anybody in the chat. Hope you're all hanging out, feeling good. That was a deep electro track called H Alpha from Vibration Theater. Let's go to another tune here, but just got Eratosthenes crater in view at the like we had earlier, but this is more zoomed in. You can see the very interesting nodular or nodular equilateral trifecta center in the middle of this crater. There are several reasons that are postulated in terms of what like the central peaks are inside lunar craters and other planets, mostly because we can see the moon craters much more clearly. So that's the most speculated upon feature, these central peaks. So in standard cosmology, these peaks are remnants of ballistic impact, so meteors impacting the moon in laboratory experiments produce some sort of central peak, but much more like a mound, I would say. Now they're saying that what happens is that the mound is thusly filled up with debris. That's why it looks like it's a flat-floored crater with a central peak, but that central peak is like an iceberg. It goes below the surface, and then the outer ridges are exploded outwards, and that's how we have all the craters on the moon. Also, this is also how apparently we have all the mares on the moon. So that's the standard idea. The electric universe model, if electrical arcing is correct, then this is a point where an electrical arc hit the surface, connected with the surface, like an anode-cathode situation, whether it was Earth or whether it was Jupiter or whether it was another body, to create this almost like a blister on the surface of the moon that exploded and left what is like this last kind of discharge central peak, which you see in electric discharge experiments in a laboratory. Pretty much every single one that has this connected lightning bolt, this mini lightning bolt connected to it, ultimately when it disconnects, when the voltage is disconnected, there's this kind of snap discharge that leaves this feature. Let's put it simply. You can see this in Billy Yelverton's videos, you can see this in Electric Universe Eyes video, you can see this in Electro Terra Vision, Jacob Gabel's videos, and of course Thunderbolts Project if you look up this phenomenon. So those are the two concepts that make the most sense. There is a third one, which is that these are all volcanoes, which is much less talked about and proposed in either of the mainstream or Electric Universe, because in a way, like, and I'll admit it, Electric Universe is kind of hell-bent on what they want to say in the model, and there are other dissent and free-thinking astronomers and physicists who want to say what they want to say, they want to stick to what they're talking about. But I think it's interesting to talk about all of it and put it together, if you haven't figured that one out yet. But Mary Quiet says, the craters on the moon have that elevated peak in the center. My thought, maybe that's where the geyser gushed. Well, I wonder about that. I feel like if you imagined the size of geysers and the fact that water at a certain size ends up becoming unwieldy. So I don't know exactly if it's water geysers as we know them on Earth. They're much smaller than this. This is something to the size of, if it's correct, 100 kilometers across, let's say. Actually, Eratosthenes is more like 50 kilometers across. But it could be a volcano, could be an electrical scar or blister, right? At this point, just like a intense electric bolt, giant cosmic lightning bolt touching the surface right here at the end. Well, what does kind of give the arcing a bit of merit, a bit more merit, is that you think about ballistics, and if you look at ballistics in a laboratory, you'll see these kind of very different type of structure, but then you see electrical arcing in a laboratory and it looks more like this structure because it has taken a little bit of time to form a bubble, and then the bubble has dissipated, creating these shapes. And when a bubble pops, maybe that's what the remnant is when you see the outer... Well, I'm not exactly sure. I feel like what happens is matter coalesces along the geometric structure. And so the geometric structure outlines all these features are outlined by and almost necessitatively are implied by the greater inherent geometric field, or electromagnetic geometric field, or the ether field. But I was going to say what lends it merit is that this is kind of at the end or along a filamentary distribution. So Eratosthenes looks like there was something that was moving along a surface or an electrical arc across the surface where matter coalesced along the filament, creating a mountain range. This is what Andrew Hall talks about on Thunderbolts Project. And he goes into it in far more detail than I really ever could. But essentially it just pinches up matter, and that's how the surface is less dense, and there's more creation and coalescing of matter along a filament. And then similarly, along a filament you would get these hot spots where an electric arc might stop, for example, at a certain type of voltage interplay, permittivity. And then at this spot it would hold for a while, and this is how you might create an electric arcing blister. And the blister would end up popping in, you know, in a giant way. I think it would happen over time, of course, not instantly like a water blister. But essentially, electric arcing, what it does, it just pulls up material, it coalesces it. And so what happens is that's why you have, I think, not only the geometry of craters, but you also get the structure of geology in general outlines the toroidal hexagon by hexagon or hexagon against pentagon, really sphere against sphere, creating primitive geometry, outlining the Birkeland filament, the toroidal field, the hypotrochoid hourglass. And this is just a version of it. So that's why I think, of course, electric arcing has merit, but I would say that given stellar metamorphosis and the fact that the moon could theoretically have been an Earth, I don't rule out volcanism anymore, because I feel like that actually makes a lot of sense, that maybe like the same way we have these giant so-called meteor craters on Earth, these were the ones on the moon. And essentially the moon like lost all its oceans and all its landmass and all its greenery and all its people or life, and then you just see the remnants of those giant meteoric style craters. But potentially these are volcanoes from an emerging that were bubbling inside a star at one point, the core of a planet. So anyway, those are the three kind of things that you need to, that I feel like I consider when I think about cratering. I don't know about geysers necessarily, Mary, just because of the size of things, but I wouldn't rule it out 100%. I just feel like these are much more like rocky surfaces with electric arc moving across, clay and different types of minerals like magnesium and titanium and basalt and just types of material, rocky, sandy types of materials would be formed at this level on the surface of the planetoid. You know what I mean? Anyway, I'm still speculating myself. There's no 100% answer right now, but it is interesting to think about the structural geometry of it. And of course, another thing that lends merit to the structural geometry is the fact that you have this kind of octahedral, dodecahedral shape of Eratosthenes, but also a perfectly centered equilateral triangle in the middle of it, and filaments surrounding it. So, and the filaments look like what we were talking about the other night, the diachotron instabilities, so basically shearing or like spiraling or twisting of filaments to the left of it. Okay, we'll keep going here with some tunes and some more zooms. Tunes and tunes. Not that.
Only one walls of our place, down from the rockets below. Oh no, it's one love undisclosed, like the witches of the forest, like I knew you once. 'Cause you've been
And then say what's up to Rob. Welcome. Good point about the latticing. So yeah, it's very key. It's a key component to all of this, is that the structure of the universe is really lattice. Hexagons into pentagons, circle packing, big circles, smaller circles filling all those gaps. Everything basically existing with its own field and its own spatial awareness, right? To not overlap. You remember those video games? I mean, video games that basically no longer really have clipping, but that's not true. There's probably a lot of clipping still with hair, but you know how textures and models in 3D used to go through each other. Like, the universe doesn't really do that, or doesn't do that at all, rather. And the reason that happens is that at every scale, from the quantum scale to the largest scale, things have a spatial awareness. So at the quantum scale, things are aware of how far or near they are from the next object. It's just, that's how things are structured. That's what matters, or that's what matter is. But anyway, quickly note here on what we're looking at. It's like I said earlier, Ptolemaeus Alphonsus. And let me get my little sketchy program, sketch. Let me know what you think. Who names them, the features on the moon? Committees, probably. Different committees, different universities over time, the government, some independent scientists probably, the Romans, the Greeks, antiquity. It's like probably a combined effect of all of that. I feel like recently only like micrometeorite impacts have been named, and NASA probably fills in some of the gaps that they need. Yeah. Rich peoples. National Geographic. Let me know who you think names the features on the moon, and if you could name this hexagonal crater, what would you name it? Alright, so let me scribble right here real quick. Ptolemaeus. I just joke that it's that, but of course Ptolemaeus. This one, interestingly, not a central peak, right? But this looks less like a crater, more like a mare, like a sea. It just feels larger. But look, it's so perfectly hexagonal. This is a key feature when I hear people, including Thunderbolts Project. I mean, even though Thunderbolts Project has mentioned hexagonal craters, they're like, most of the lunar surface is circular. And I'm like, are you guys looking with the same set of eyes? Like, what's the deal here? Like, I can't, so many people who I find very smart all say the same thing. They're like, craters circular, craters circular. Oh, moon fully, all circular, mostly circular. I'm like, no, like pretty much every single crater on the moon is like either hexagon, pentagon. Rarely do you see something so eroded to the point where it's like actually circular. Tell me, you know, fight me on it. I dare you. I dare you to fight me. All right, so interestingly, Ptolemaeus doesn't have a central peak. Right, it does have a tiny micro crater. Usually these are called by the parent crater, so Ptolemaeus A, I imagine, or Ptolemaeus B. It doesn't, this little micro crater right here. So it's an off-center peak. I don't feel like this is actually a peak. This might be something else, right? This doesn't really look, this looks like a little kind of crater within a crater almost, right? It doesn't actually look like a pinched peak. However, to the left of it, you have Alphonsus, and I think that what dawned on me, like when I was looking at hexagons, is that this relationship, really the pentagon into the hexagon, is what is so clutch about this, is because this is the same as serenity and tranquility. So you have these micro and macro versions of things right there on the same surface. Same way that we have old people and young people coexist, and the same way we have old and young animals that exist, and the same way we have now in the stellar metamorphosis idea, we have planets that are different ages that all coexist, which, again, great merit to that theory because of that. And then what do we have? So a little bit less defined, but still, that's Arzachel, with more of a central peak here. A lot of the peaks typically, to me, look like pyramidal, like pinched, kind of like if you pinched a bed sheet that was pulled taut, and you get that kind of pinched top. Some of them are a little sharper, like this crater right here is Albategnius, and Albategnius has a crater at the vertice, or at the corner, and the edge of the larger crater. But the center peak is much more pyramidal. It looks sharper, as you can really see it. So that's what we're looking at. Anyway, I think it's pretty fascinating, especially because if you remember this relationship, this hex to pent relationship, I mentioned it a few months ago, but I got into Dan Winter's work, and he talks about the mudras in sitting meditation, in zazen, where you make your fingers, right? Like you create these pentagons, polygons, hexagons with your fingers to create mudras to meditate to. So essentially, Dan Winter is the only person, I think, who has actually verbalize or vocalize the answer to why we have a pentagon side by side with a hexagon, and the way he explains it is chaos into sturdiness. So entropy into neg entropy is the relationship of hex to pent. Pent up aggression, you know, and then hexagons are the orderly portion of nature. So we have representation in polygonal geometry that actually mirrors and through fractal recursion, the same shape up and down the lattice. Anyway, that's how I see it. So again, the phenomenon of large craters on the rims of larger craters, and then even further than that, small craters on the rims of those. And I'll show you something like Gassendi crater, where you have three of them, all like a mare, a crater, and a crater on the rim of that crater. So you have this kind of diamond ring effect. All right. It gets so hot when I stream, it's like really insanely intense. Let's keep going with the tunes here. Delicate coming up.
So find me. Delegate my body, everyone is at the ready. Don't matter about it, don't give us some love. Heavy metal outside, just seem like life will fit the crime. And I gotta make it through the storm. Please don't shake my little rocket boat. Days go by, but I still roll. All we need are friends in the rain. Coming around again, coming around again. Don't need no chains. Yeah. Jurassic trees built enough to please the tourists. Oh, no one knew, wishing we could live in caverns. Carved a name upon a tree, wait for you at the edge of the forest. Took 100 summers just to get to know you. I'll shine my catechies so you find me back again. Hope the time will come again. Never know, I never know, and that's why I keep saying, please don't shake my little rocking boat. Don't shake my day to time, but I still know. Need friends in the rain. Coming around again, coming around again. Don't we know? I don't know what you do to me, oh baby, wide open, staring at a trillion bright lights. Where the hell are you? Oh, my heart is wide open, wide open, wide open. Driving to a million bus sites. Don't try. Show
Space Fam exactly at midnight. Clouds are rolling in, I feel like it might rain, so this is perfect timing. It's been a super fun stream tonight, really, I think one of the best, I feel. Hope you all had a great time. Awesome to ride with the Space Fam once again on like the 700th or so stream, something together. September 5th in the books, actually September 4th in the books. Moving through this year quick. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your night. Sleep well. If you catch us tomorrow and you weren't on the stream, please leave a comment. I've been appreciating the comments and trying to respond a little more quickly. Y'all are so great and kind and just respectful in this chat, and I appreciate you very much. And thanks for letting me just share all my thoughts and music with you. It's always very meaningful, and I appreciate it. One last track here, and I think I'm going to pick it, called The Sky Don't Lie, and I'll fade it out with our moon too. Take care, Space Fam, till our next ride. This is your captain signing off.